And hello, everyone. Week number 3. And in week 3, we are continuing on with chapter 1. So, picking up from around page 15 and leading toward the right kind of change. So, as administration and faculty leaders face this time period of change, the question clearly is not whether they should change, but what kind of change should be made. Historically, higher education in the United States has responded to calls for change when these voices became strong enough. This happened in the mid 1800s when land grant universities were established for the purpose of providing a more application oriented education. In the late 1800s, when universities introduced discipline based research and departments. And in the mid 1900s, when society called for greater access to higher education by non traditional kinds of students. Since the 1980s, a similar chorus of voices has been calling for another change, a change in how students learn, and especially in what they learn. In a sense, these voices are describing the dreams that others in society have for higher education, and these dreams are coming from both national organizations and well-informed individuals. So what does change look like in professional healthcare education? So how do we deliver high quality educational product for less money and still achieve top outcomes? This is of course a big concern because we don't want people to graduate with a worthless bachelor's degree that costs them $40,000 to $60,000 to earn. How do we advance the professional knowledge of our discipline? How do we incorporate technology and have that technology be relevant to future clinical practice? And how do we implement interdisciplinary education? So let's talk about national organizations and my national organization is the American Physical Therapy Association. National organizations will publish reports every so often looking at the future of education in that field. The National Strength and Conditioning Association recognizes programs that distinguish themselves. So what they do is they have a education recognition program, recognizes and distinguishes academic programs with approved and standard training curricula. Recognized programs are designed to prepare students for the NSCA certified personal trainer or strength and conditioning specialist certifications. I'm sure there are things for other healthcare groups. I'm just familiar with those two because those are in my areas of specialty. One of the earliest voices to catch national attention on the subject came from a study group in the National Institute of Education. They published a report in 1984, Involvement in Learning. It acknowledged the positive changes that have occurred in American higher education, but also expressed concern about some problems. Problem in student achievement, a shift in undergraduate programs toward narrow specialization, a decline in the attractiveness of faculty careers, and many others. They also noted that traditional ways of measuring excellence were inadequate because they focused on resources and inputs, not on what students actually learn and how much they grow as a result of higher education. And that gets back to what we talked about a few weeks ago or a week ago, what the definition of a liberal education is, trying to transform an individual. And I think that's always, there's a tension there. Are those people coming to school, is that may be the focus of what the university or the faculty has in mind, but oftentimes the students think, okay, I'm here because I want to progress in my knowledge to prepare myself for graduate school in some capacity. So it's kind of an interesting discussion. And again, kind of outside of what we do as graduate school professors. So the NIE They urged institutions of higher education to produce demonstrable improvements not only in student knowledge, but also in students' capabilities, skills, and attitudes between entrance and graduation. One year later, the Association of American Colleges sponsored a project called Redefining the Meaning and Purpose of Baccalaureate Degrees. The language and tone of this report was stronger and even more critical than the previous NIE report. The opening statement sounded like a wake-up call. They wrote, "The educational failures of the United States are emerging as a major concern of the 1980s. Our report addresses the crisis in American education as it is revealed in the decay of the college course of study and in the role of college faculties in creating and nurturing that decay. As for what passes for a college curriculum, almost anything goes. We've reached a point where we're more confident about the length of a college education than about its content or purpose." And that's kind of an interesting thing there. You know, we have a 4-year degree, but do you need 4 years to complete all your prerequisites for physical therapy school or for occupational therapy school? How much money could we save people if they did not have to take a variety of different classes? I would be fully supportive of that. And the reason is, it's not that I think learning's bad or that learning's a waste of time or that I want to see any people, any professors lose their livelihood, because obviously if you're decreasing the amount of students taking history or math classes or whatever, there's going to be a decrease in jobs. There are certain courses that not maybe have become kind of irrelevant. Like, I remember I had to take a drawing class. I had to take some sort of art class, and drawing fit that. Well, if I wanted to learn how to draw, how many things can I find on YouTube these days? Different tutorials. So if learning, if that was meaningful to me, there's all that resources out there to do that. Same thing with history. There are resources out there, some good, some bad. But there are many things that I could go to if I wanted to. Do I need that to define myself as an individual? It gets back to that liberal arts education again. And again, maybe that needs to evolve over time. Now, the members of the project group, they went on to describe a minimum required curriculum that was strikingly different from the by now familiar major and general distribution requirements. They proposed a new type of curriculum, the central theme of which that students should learn how to learn. In a similar vein, the National Association of State Universities and Land Grant Colleges called on universities to be proactive in helping all students develop essential life skills and important values in higher education. They wrote, quote, "We want to stress that values deserve special attention in this effort. The highest educational challenge we face revolves around developing character, conscience, citizenship, tolerance, civility, and individual and social responsibility in our students. We dare not ignore this obligation in a society that sometimes gives the impression that virtues such as these are discretionary. These should be part of the standard equipment of our graduates, not options." So obviously, from their 1997 report, they were giving more value to the overall liberal education. At the same time, Campus Connect, an organization devoted to the promotion of service learning in higher education, co-sponsored a meeting at the Wingspread Conference Center in Wisconsin called the Civic Responsibilities of Research Universities. They prepared a statement called the Wingspread Declaration. The conferees proclaimed their belief that research universities must prepare students to be responsible citizens and enable faculty to develop and put their knowledge to work for the betterment of their communities. If one wants to prepare students for responsible, engaged citizenship, What should students learn? They should be learning the skills, developing the habits and identities, and acquiring the knowledge to contribute to the general welfare on campus, in communities, and in the world. So let's talk about research. Research informs practice. That's something that we all should be considering if we're going into academia. Here's a couple papers that were published in one from 2020, the other one from 2022. One was from me, one was from others at my group. These are just samples. Research helps inform practice, and that makes us better, I think, physical therapists. It informs how we help people in our region, and it helps to influence potentially other therapists across the country. Getting back to that liberal education again, it's an approach to undergraduate education that promotes integration of learning across the curriculum and co-curriculum and between academic and experiential learning in order to develop specific learning outcomes that are essential for work, citizenship, and life. And that's the goal of many undergraduate programs, but are we charging too much for that? Are we expecting too much? I've given some of the pros and cons for it from different groups and from my opinion. Curious what your thoughts are. In 2005, the Association of American Colleges and Universities initiated an ambitious national project called Liberal Education and America's Promise. It aimed at engendering more effective liberal education in higher education. As part of that project, they surveyed civic, business, and educational leaders nationally about what kind of learning matters in the 21st century. This led to a set of essential learning outcomes that's been used by numerous colleges and universities. Knowledge of human cultures and the physical and natural world, intellectual and practical skills, personal and social responsibility, and integrative learning. So this kind of leads to pre-professional education. We work in professional education. What's pre-professional education? Well, a number of studies have been conducted in various fields of pre-professional education to determine what graduates in those particular fields should know and how changing times have changed what students need to learn. And so basically, kind of summarizing what your text has talked about is that graduate school programs have helped to inform what undergrad students should be learning to help prepare them for their transition to those programs. Here's an engineering example. An engineering professions accreditation body has taken the need for new kinds of learning a step further and incorporated specific kinds of learning into their accreditation standards. The new standards identify specific kinds of learning that engineering students should have achieved by graduation. These include specific engineering skills or competencies, general professional skills, and broad professional perspectives. One thing I will agree with is that I really value how polished and mostly professional students are once they come to the physical therapy program that I teach in. And that does come through or come about because of the work that's done by the undergraduate faculty and the types of learning experiences that they generate to try to meet some of these goals, to try to meet some of these objectives. So the undergraduate faculty are doing really hard work. I think my area is I just hope that people get less student loan expenses, and can we be more effective at achieving these pre-professional objectives without requiring unnecessary work from the student. This is another example talking about STEM education, science, technology, education, math, or engineering and math, excuse me. Given the importance of these areas in the modern world, what should students learn? They think they should learn new kinds of learning, development of communication skills, teamwork, and lifelong learning. In addition to these calls by national and professional organizations for changes in what students learn, a number of people who are careful observers of higher education have published major statements calling for the same thing. One of these, a book called Redesigning Higher Education. After completing a major study on the topic, the author noted that leaders in business, industry, and government have identified several important kinds of learning needed by citizens and workers in the years ahead. He labeled these as critical competencies, and his list included the following personal characteristics, skills, and dispositions: conscientiousness, personal responsibility and dependability, the ability to act in a principled, ethical fashion, skill in oral and written communication, interpersonal and team skills, skill in critical thinking and in solving complex problems, respect for people different from oneself, the ability to adapt to change, and the ability and desire for lifelong learning. So those all seem really important. Are there ways that we can assess that within our physical therapy and occupational therapy or other healthcare programs? And yes, probably for sure we can generate instances where students can practice and also when they go out in clinic. Are significantly better kinds of learning really possible? That's the question posed by Fink. And so paradigm shifts have occurred, especially at the undergraduate level, and looking at things like the mission and purpose of your teaching, from improving the quality of instruction to improving the quality of learning for success, from changing your thinking of quality of entering students to the quality of exiting students. That's going to be a big one, especially in physical therapy, that we have more students that are going to be coming because there's more programs. We may not have the quality of the entering students, but we need to make sure that they are of quality exiting. Teaching and learning structures, transitioning from covering material to creating specific learning results. For learning theory, transitioning from learning is cumulative and linear to learning is a nesting and an interaction of frameworks. For productivity and funding, transitioning from defining productivity in the terms of cost per hour of instruction per student to cost per unit of learning per student. And nature of roles, transitioning from faculty being primarily lecturers to faculty being primarily designers of learning methods and environments. And that one is really crucial because I think a lot of times once we achieve a terminal doctorate, we might feel like we are an expert and people should be learning from us. Instead, how can we create or design a learning environment? So in Exhibit 1.3, here's a comparison of old and new paradigms for college thinking or college teaching. Old paradigm, looking at knowledge transferred from faculty to student. New paradigm, jointly constructed by students and faculty. So how might you do that? Through collaborative research. Old paradigm student, a passive vessel to be filled with a faculty's knowledge, to a active constructor, discoverer, and transformer of knowledge. I'll let you read through the rest of these here. Go ahead and pause the recording and just kind of think about the relationship between kind of the old paradigm and the new paradigm. When you did your undergraduate work, were you falling under the old paradigm or the new? Go ahead and pause the recording now. Okay, welcome back. I assume you've had a chance to pause the recording and read through things. Let's move on. So now that we have all these new perspectives and paradigms, what can or should teachers do differently? What new ways of teaching and learning have been developed that can augment the traditional practices of lecture and class discussion? So let's look at new forms of teaching. These might be things you've experienced. These might be things that are new to you for the first time. Active learning. Active learning is the process of getting the student to engage, to apply, to be doing. A lot of things that we do within physical therapy, occupational therapy, and healthcare in general are active learning. Go back to the example of teaching musculoskeletal examination. You might teach them what they're going to be doing. Like, here's our order of testing somebody. Here's our order of first we observe them. Next, we take a look at their active range of motion. Next, we do resistive testing. And then move through that sequence of examination components. But then you go and you immediately do it. So they have a chance to look at fellow classmates. What are they observing? How are they reviewing active range of motion? How are they practicing and demonstrating resistive testing? Another active learning example, in my cardiopulmonary class, I could teach people components of a phase 3 cardiac rehab program. What I instead did was not act as the sage from the stage, but I required a group project work where one, they had to go to the research to find and develop the best program possible for a phase 3 cardiac rehab program for a particular diagnosis. And then two, they had to record a screencast, 20 minutes, no longer. Three, then they had to listen to each other's screencast and then answer test questions related to that material. It took the onus off of me to be filling their brains, and they had to learn how to create. They had to learn how to find the information, which is going to be much more valuable to them in the long run. Writing to learn. Teachers have used writing for many years, but primarily to assess learning with term papers and essay questions on tests rather than as an integral part of the learning process. The whole writing across the curriculum effort made the argument that writing activities can also enhance the process and quality of student learning. How students learn. Since the 1990s, there has been much research on learning, especially college-level learning. Research on how the brain works, has offered numerous insights for creating effective learning experiences for students. Small group learning. So this kind of gets into that project side of thing, assigning things, coming together, analyzing the information, constructing it into a form that is presentable, or just discussing a case. What did people get out of that case? What did they miss? What can other people contribute that can help others understanding after completing the small group learning? Those discussions that have there can be rich. They can bring them to the large group and get people thinking about things in a different way. Assessment is learning. Teachers have been assessing students for forever, but what about figuring out the students or incorporating the students in that assessment process? What's going on here is, I'll give a few examples. One college, Alverno College, uses a learning portfolio and the resources of its extensive assessment center to give continuous developmental feedback to students about their learning as part of what the staff calls student assessment of learning. At the level of the individual courses, the popular classroom assessment techniques serve the same purpose. Feedback, usually ungraded, is provided frequently so students can enhance the quality of their learning and teachers can assess the effectiveness of different teaching and learning techniques and strategies. Educative assessments, another concept, meaning the assessment process not only reflects what the students can currently do, but it also actually educates and thereby enhances what students can do. Service learning, getting them out of the classroom, applying their skills. We have service learning trips where we have students go to Uganda to work in orphanages. And so teaching the care providers there how to best treat those children in those orphanages. I'm going to be going with other members of our healthcare teams down to Costa Rica in May of 2024. And we're going to build up a program there where then physical therapists can come with me, or I should say physical therapy students can come with me and do musculoskeletal assessments and treatment. I've also been involved in service learning, working with migrant farm workers. And so the public health nurses in my neck of the woods, they partnered with the vineyards and go out during the summer and provide health services to the migrant farm workers. And part of that process, we would also do musculoskeletal screens and refer people on as needed. So service learning can be a great way to give back to the community and to help students get an opportunity to learn and also kind of facilitate that understanding of the world being bigger than just what they're used to. Here's a picture of a couple of our graduates working with a child from Uganda. Next up, reflecting on one's own teaching and learning. So it's a good idea for you to sit back and to think, okay, how did things work? Did I achieve what I wanted from the class? Did learning occur at the level that I thought it should? Or if it didn't, what can I do differently? And then instructional technology. Technology is continuing to advance all the time. Oftentimes we default to PowerPoint and doing presentations in class, but are there ways that you can incorporate new things? And one thing I'm going to try to do in my health and wellness class this next term is to create word clouds and have other surveys where students are able to automatically participate and not feel like they're having to raise their hand or always kind of answer questions. Sometimes getting people to participate is really hard. So using technology can help to facilitate that. And there's so many different ways. It's amazing all the possibilities that are out there. What is it that faculty need to learn about and can learn about that will enable them to provide a higher quality learning experience for students? In Fink's view, four general aspects of teaching that are shown in figure 1.1 that we'll see, I think, in a bit. They're involved in teaching, regardless if that teaching is effective or ineffective, traditional or innovative. All teachers need to have some knowledge of the subject matter, make decisions about the design of their instruction, interact with students, and manage course events. The first two in general take place before the course begins, the other two after it. So here are those four components of teaching. Again, knowledge of the subject matter, design of instruction begin before instruction, and then teacher-student interactions and course management occur after the class begins. So what are the teacher-student interactions? Well, these are the interactions we have with our students. And you've had those situations before where somebody always raises their hand in class and participates. You oftentimes don't see this where a bunch of people raise their hand. They all want to be participating and answering. It doesn't usually happen like that. But what we need to try to do through the different methods that we teach is facilitate opportunities for people to participate in class, whether that is direct or indirect. And we also need to make sure that we provide opportunities for students to meet with us, talk with us outside of class to be able to help them if they're struggling. Office hours, communicating by email, and so forth. Course management, this refers to being organized and ready for the different events in a course. Design of instruction. In contrast, interacting with students is a skill in which few college-level teachers have extensive training. Some have been fortunate enough to learn about design of learning experiences because they went through teacher training as an undergraduate, had a course on the subject as a graduate student, or participated in an in-service faculty development program. But most don't. Just because somebody is a PhD does not mean that they necessarily know how to teach. It means they're an expert in their area. Now, looking at these fundamental tasks of teaching another way, it also seems that course design has got the greatest potential for solving the problems that faculty frequently face in their teaching. To test this proposition, it's useful to look at 3 common problems and ask which of the 3 possible responses is likely to be the most valuable. Getting students to prepare before class. This is tough because we oftentimes have people doing lots of work all the time. So, for example, in our DPT program, starting early in the term, they start having exams 1 to 2 a week, sometimes 3. So getting them to do things outside of class can be tough, that preparation work. One way people do things is to have flipped classrooms where they do some of the instruction via screencast beforehand and then spend all the time doing in-class work. From an undergrad perspective, teachers frequently complain that they cannot get students to do the reading and other homework assignments before coming to class. The class is unprepared for working on challenging problems or questions as a result. So what do people do? Sometimes they assign big penalties for not doing the readings. They give students pep talks. They redesign the course to give students reasons to do the readings. All 3 are potentially helpful, but most people select the redesign option because it's not punitive. Student boredom. I've seen faces like this before. People wishing they were someplace else. Well, what can help student boredom? One is to enhance your lecturing skills. Be more dynamic. Insert more material from cutting-edge research. Insert periods of time within the lecture where students have to work on problems, work on cases. That's redesigning the course to replace lecturing with more active learning. Poor retention of knowledge. What's this all about? Poor retention of knowledge is the proposition or the third problem that teachers confront, that students seem to learn the material in the course, but they then fail to retain it as they go from one class to the next. Well, how could you solve the problem? Maybe make the tests better or tougher. Give students a refresher course during the intersession, or redesign the course to give students more experience with what they've learned. And that's probably the best way. More experience. Sometimes we feel like we've got to stuff them. Maybe we should just focus on what is most relevant and get a lot of practice in that area. All right, that is the end of this section.